Hello everybody and welcome one more time to our course of the book of Prabhuji, Kundalini Yoga, The Power is in You. This is a book and is the material that we're using for this class and for all the classes throughout this course. It represents the foundation, the basis, the information that we're sharing comes from it. We are expanding it, we are exploring it, but everything that we're sharing comes from this book. Today, in this occasion, we're having the opportunity to delve and to explore into the topic of the awakening, ascent, and descent of the Kundalini Shakti. And as many of you know, if you already heard previous classes, you will notice that this is a topic that I already made reference to. And today we're going to discover why. Some of the things that we're going to be seeing today is why it is so important that we respect all of the stages regarding this topic of the awakening, ascent, and descent of the Kundalini. What is the difference between each stage? And also why we will see how in the book it's explained how in general we are more concerned or we find more relevant the stages of the awakening and the ascent of the Kundalini, and not so much in regards to the descent. And we will see why it's also so important, this stage, and what are the symptoms, what's going to happen in this actual stage. So this is actually the last chapter of the book. This is the last chapter of the first section of the book. So in the next few classes, we're going to be delving into the second section of the book, which is about each chakra. So now we can begin speaking and sharing in regards to the first stage that we are describing in this chapter, which is the awakening of the Kundalini Shakti. As we already mentioned on different occasions, the Kundalini Yoga is a very sophisticated system that gives us the possibility of awakening the Kundalini. It is always recommended under the expert guidance of an enlightened master. In this chapter and also in the section on the sadhana, we go and continue expressing the importance of this and the risk involved in doing so without the proper guidance. We are now going to see how only in this stage of the awakening of the Kundalini, without including the ascent and descent, this one includes 4 stages, which are the harmonizing of the Ida Nadi and the Pingala Nadi, the opening of the chakras, then we have the awakening of Sushumna Nadi, and the last stage on the awakening of the Kundalini is the actual awakening of the Kundalini Shakti. In the book, it is expressed very clearly how the order of these stages is crucial, because the premature awakening of Kundalini can cause harm. If we awaken the Kundalini while the chakras are closed, it can become stuck for years. So the Kundalini energy can stay repressed in the first chakra if it is awakened before the Sushumna Nadi. This is going to lead not only to a series of physical problems, but also psychological problems. We can now continue to explore each of these stages, beginning by the first one that we said, which is the harmonizing of the Ida Nadi and the Pingala Nadi. We had our class where we explore the nadis, and in this one we develop them in depth. So it is very recommended to listen that class so you can better understand this stage that we're going to share now. We also learn how the Ida and Pingala Nadi are located alongside the Sushumna, and they are a manifestation at the individual level of the same polarity that maintains the universe at the cosmic level, day and night, feminine, masculine, positive, negative. Ida is going to be refreshing and pale, while Pingala it's going to be creating heat. It's going to be red in color and is related to the digestion. Ida is going to be called Chandra Nadi because it's going to channel the negative feminine or lunar energy, while the Pingala is called Surya Nadi because it channels the positive masculine or solar energy. Both prana channels, they meet at the Sushumna Nadi in the first chakra, which is the Muladhara chakra. Something else that we learn is the fact that the activity of these two channels is cyclical. If we learned in our class of the nadis that it's between 90 and 180 minutes, that each one is more dominant. But what's happening in this cyclical activity of these nadis is the fact that our negative habits and behavior that are typical of this modern society have disturbed their natural harmony and balance. However, as we will see later in the section of the sadhana, these nadis can be purified and their functioning can be harmonized through sadhana, that it's going to include asanas, pranayama, which is breathing exercises, and also relaxation. Only when the balance between these two nadis is reestablished can the Sushumna be awakened. Only when we actually balance these two nadis. So the second stage is the opening of the chakras. The opening of the chakras can be felt in our psychology, in our personality, and it can be also felt in our attitudes. In most of the human beings, the only open chakra is the first one, which is the highest in the animal kingdom. So because of this, we mostly work to satisfy our basic and essential needs of sleeping, of eating, of defending ourselves, and reproducing. So the Kundalini Yoga cannot be learned from a book or with an ordinary teacher. And there is something that I want us to be very, very clear, and it's the fact that we are sharing about this beautiful path, and someone might get the inspiration of starting to practice it, but it is not recommended to do it without the guidance of a realized master. So I wanted to do this parenthesis. In the book, Prabhuji explains us in repeated occasions, and this is another of them, that to advance along this path, the guidance of a realized guru is required, because not every student is born at the same level of evolution. Due to spiritual efforts in past life, some people's lower centers have already been opened and they do not need to work on these chakras. Some people are born with open chakras without even knowing it. They are going to be people that will usually stand out in the society, and they are going to become important leaders. Therefore, it is essential that a spiritual master tell us at least our current level of progress. So different methods that we can find to open the chakras are the practice of specific pranayamas, or also by repeating the appropriate mantras. We will see later in our class of the chakras how each mantra has a Bija mantra. We're going to explain what is the meaning of these words, and we're going to get to know more about the appropriate mantras for each chakra, and we're also going to delve even more in our section of the practice or sadhana of the Kundalini Yoga. So we are going to continue with the third stage in this awakening of the Kundalini, which is the awakening of the Sushumna Nadi. So the awakening of the main nadi is an extremely important step in the process of the Kundalini Yoga. If Sushumna has not awakened, it is not very helpful to awaken the chakras or even the Kundalini. Basically, it has nowhere to rise, and we also share this in our class on the nadis, and it is the reason why this is the main nadi. It is where the Kundalini will ascend to the 7th center to achieve this fusion with Shiva. When the serpentine powers ascends, the energy that does not rise through Sushumna simply dissipates. Thus, at times we may see how practitioners that perceive a great amount of energy in their body may tremble with that power, yet they are going to return to their same weaknesses once this experience is over. So although this energy is rising, their personalities and lives remain the same, because Kundalini cannot rise through the main nadi while it remains closed. Only when the Sushumna awakens can Kundalini freely ascend and be united with Shiva. So we see here some answers of maybe some, if some of your practitioners or you are more familiar with this path of the Kundalini, then this is an answer of why all this trembling, why all this some symptoms in our physical body when there is a rising or an ascension of the Kundalini Yoga. Now we see here how if the Sushumna Nadi is not actually open, then this energy is going to rise. We saw also in our class of the difference between the Prana Shakti and Kundalini Shakti. When there is an ascension in the Prana Shakti level, it's less intense than when it's actually the Kundalini Shakti, which can rise only through the Sushumna Nadi. So we can see there the difference and what is happening. Like the person can have this experience, but then it's going to stay with the same weaknesses, it's going to stay with the same personality, because this development, this maturity of also having the Sushumna Nadi open didn't happen yet. So there are different methods that we can use, we can practice in order to open the Sushumna Nadi, and this one can be awakened through asanas and pranayama, as well as by certain Kriya Yoga techniques. For in Prabhuji's writing, he gives us a definition of this yoga for someone that is not familiar with it. And he's telling us that the Kriya Yoga is the yoga of the cleansing and purification, both externally and internally. This word Kriya means action or effort. So the essence of this yogic path is the observation of our efforts and actions. To finish with this stage, it is important to clarify that it's not advisable to attempt this without the expert guidance of an enlightened spiritual master. We are going to continue with the last stage in this process, which is finally the awakening of the Kundalini Shakti. After going over the previous stages, we can speak about the actual awakening of the Kundalini. The book starts by giving us a few verses where we can find references about the awakening of the Kundalini, like symptoms and the process itself. In this specific class, we're going to share only the first one, and this one we can find it in the Devi Gita. It refers to the awakening of the Kundalini Shakti in the following way. First, inhaling in the yoga way, allow your attention to be focused on Muladhara. Between the anus and the genitals lies Kundalini Shakti. With that key, Kundalini should be awakened. This is from the Devi Gita, from the Devi Bhagavatam 7:35-48. So, we mentioned many times how spiritual evolution is not the result of a practice, technique, method, or sadhana. However, the the systematic practice recommended by the Guru should not be neglected, because through it we can create the appropriate situation for something divine to happen. So it is not that we can manipulate the divine, or that enlightenment is a process of cause and effect, but by practice we can create certain conditions, or we can call it a foundation, so that something of the divine can happen. I know that Prabhuji mentions in his writings and lectures how it is not possible that enlightenment will be the result of a practice, because then the method, that practice, will be more important than enlightenment itself or God himself. So the process through which we accomplish something will be more important than the thing itself. And what we've been learning is the fact that there is nothing that we need to add or to acquire, but actually to realize that we already are what we're looking for. So a practice will not give us that, but it can create certain space for the realization to happen, as we see how Prabhuji writes in the book that it shouldn't be neglected. Like the systematic practice that our gurus recommended to us shouldn't be neglected. As I many times mentioned, this is a very serious path. It's very sophisticated, very systematic. It has very specific order to the things. It always needs to be under the guidance. So it shouldn't be neglected, the recommended practice by our guru. We are going to continue now sharing various ways in which the awakening of the Kundalini Shakti can occur. The first one is a natural awakening that occurs in people who have practiced strict sadhana in their past lives. It should be remembered that many souls reincarnate repeatedly, both on our planet as well as on others. So those who experience a spontaneous awakening should not be alarmed, which is what usually happens. Someone finds himself or herself suddenly experiencing different symptoms of the awakening of the Kundalini and don't know what to do, especially in the past, when the information about the Kundalini awakening was not as accessible as it is today. So whoever experiences this, what they should do is to approach a genuine guru who can offer them the information about this phenomenon and how to continue their practice. Another way to awaken the divine fire is through mantras. It's something that we mentioned. Through the practice of the mantra, it is possible to purify the nadis, the mind, the physical body, and also the astral body. This purification, what's going to do is that presents the optimal conditions for the awakening of the serpentine power. In addition, repeating mantras, which is called japa, directly affects the chakras and awakens the Kundalini from the sleep in the Muladhara chakra. It is also possible to awaken the powerful force of the mother within us through what we call tapasya, which is austerities. In this modern society that we could also call consumerist, which is dedicated to consumption, we can clearly see how we are going after satisfaction of our need and we live to please our senses. So this wandering after pleasure creates what we can say it's a mental dissipation, and with this it's going to create a loss of energy and vitality. So the austerity, what it's going to do is that involves allowing ourselves only what is really necessary to live. And this is going to bring us inner tranquility, and it also purifies the nadis. The energy of tapasya, it's going to disturb the sleep of the Kundalini. One of the simplest ways to awaken the serpentine power is associating with an enlightened master. If the guru is genuine, which is Jivan Mukta, liberated in life, he or she will have the ability to channel the spiritual power and transmit it to sincere aspirants who are fully open, which is called Shaktipata. The master can awaken the Kundalini Shakti through a word, through a glance, through physical contact, or simply by proximity and association. So it is important, I think, to mention in this specific way, which is one of the simplest way. We will see another one that is the simplest way. Well, this one it's also considered one of the simplest one, the association with a master, but we also see very precise and exact the way that is explained in the book, how this, first of all, the guru needs to be a Jivan Mukta, someone that is liberated in this world. And at the same time, the sadhaka, the aspirant, needs to be fully open, needs to be vulnerable. So we have certain requirements, certain conditions for this Shaktipata to actually happen. And we see, as I just mentioned, precisely these two requirements for this method to actually work. So now, the simplest way we see in the book that we find is the practice to awaken Kundalini. It's going to begin with focusing our attention on the Muladhara chakra, which is going to make prana to accumulate in this center. So this pressure and this heat that is generated by this concentration of vital energy are the agents that will awaken the serpentine power. Immediately after being awakened, the Kundalini uncoils from the Svayambhulinga and is going to penetrate the Sushumna Nadi that had been previously obstructed by the Kundalini itself. We're going to see how this is stated in the Yoga Shuddhamani Upanishad. We're going to read, "With her mouth, Kundalini is eternally closed in the passage of the door of Brahman, the consciousness that permeates everything. Passing through the passageway, one is liberated from suffering by reaching the door of Brahman." This is found in the Yoga Shuddhamani Upanishad 37. When the Kundalini begins to awaken, there is like a mild tingling throughout the body, which is going to expand from the feet upward. Something that is important to clarify is that waking the Kundalini is very different from elevating it. The latter is more difficult because it depends not only on practicing certain techniques, but on our state of purity. And I would like to read the exact words from the book. "While many can awaken the serpentine power, only few manage to elevate it, because this requires intense practice, perseverance, patience, purity, and deep transformation." Again, intense practice, perseverance, patience, purity, and deep transformation. So here we see different qualities, different things that are needed in order to the ascent, the elevation of the Kundalini. And we see then, we're starting to see why it's going to be more difficult, the actual ascent, compared to the awakening of the Kundalini. We saw things like perseverance, this patience, this purity, and a deep transformation, because as we many times spoke, this spirit is going to be reflected in our behavior. So then with this purity, it's going to come this deep transformation. Every time we will see very soon how everything is affecting our personality, and the more we advance, then the more we can see there is more clarity, and this is also influencing our personality. So this deep transformation is going also to happen. We are now going to share more about the ascent of the Kundalini Shakti. We're starting to speak about it. There is an example in the book that says that just as mercury rises in a thermometer until reaching the body temperature, then the elevation of the Kundalini Shakti, it's going to indicate our spiritual level. So we are comparing these two phenomena, like the same way that a thermometer is showing our physical temperature, then the same way the Kundalini Shakti, the ascension of the Kundalini Shakti, is expressing our spiritual level. The vertical ascension of the serpentine power reflects the development and the evolution at the level of consciousness. The Kundalini can ascend only after having transcended the desire for gratification of the senses. So this one is only rises in those with pure hearts who are free from attachments and possessions and passions. I don't know if you remember when we were speaking about our class of the grantees and what were the things that we needed to actually be free from in order to keep elevating the Kundalini. So this is very much related to it. The elevation of the Kundalini Shakti is described in some scripture as what it's called Linga Veda, or the piercing of the mystical emblems, and others call it as Sat Chakra Veda, which is the piercing of the 6 chakras. The Kundalini Shakti rises to the Sahasrara Chakra through the Brahma Nadi, which is located within the Sushumna Nadi. And on its way, it penetrates and pierces each chakra, embracing their lingas, which are mystical emblems. And it's going to unite with the devas of each chakra, absorbing these energies. So I would like to make a parenthesis here to let you know that we're going to go in deeper in our classes on the chakras, on these terms that I just mentioned, as the lingas or the Vedas of each chakra. So to continue, during this process of involution, the serpentine power absorbs all 36 tattvas or categories of existence, both the gross ones and the subtle ones. As we already saw in our class on the tattvas, it does from dense to subtle. The manifestation of the universe occurs in the opposite way, from the most subtle to the grossest. This was the order that we saw in our class. And in the process of involution, when the Kundalini awakens from the most solid or dense to the most subtle, this is going to be the order. So when she arrived to each chakra, it's going to dissolve the corresponding tattvas. The Karmendriyas, which are the organs of actions, the Jnanendriyas, which are the cognitive organs, the Mahabhutas or great elements, and the Tanmatras, which are the subtle elements. So something that it should be noted is that the Kashmir Shaivism has a very peculiar way of assigning these 5 organs of actions, the Pancha Karmendriyas, to each chakra. It classifies them by their subtlety and assigns them to the first 5 centers, from the grossest, which is the Muladhara, to the most subtle of these 5, which is the Vishuddha. The elevation process, it's going to begin in the Muladhara chakra, and it's going to do it with the dissolution of the following. The Mahabhuta here is Prithvi or earth. The Karmendriya is Pada or foot. The Jnanendriya is Grana or nose. And the Tanmatra is going to be Gandha or smell. Then this powerful current of the serpentine fire, it's going to take the smell to the Swadhisthana chakra and process, and then it's going to proceed to dissolve the following, which is the Mahabhuta, in this case is Apas or water. The Karmendriya is Pani or hands. The Jnanendriya is Rasana or tongue. And the Tanmatra is Rasa or taste. What's going to happen is that the taste is going to be pulled into the Manipura chakra, where it's going to be dissolved with the following. The Mahabhuta here is Tejas or fire. The Karmendriya is going to be Payu or anus. The Jnanendriya is Kakshu or eyes. And the Tanmatra is Rupa, which is shape or color. Then this shape is going to be brought to the Anahata chakra, where it's going to be dissolved with the Mahabhuta, which is Vayu or air. The Karmendriya of this center is the Upasta or the genitals. The Jnanendriya is Tuvak or skin. And the Tanmatra in this center is Sparsha or touch. The touch is going to be brought to the Vishuddha chakra, and there it's going to be dissolved with the Mahabhuta, which is Akasha or ether. The Karmendriya is back or mouth. The Jnanendriya is Shrota or ears. And the Tanmatra is Shabda or sound. So it's very interesting what's going to happen from here, because then the sound is taken to the Ajna chakra, and then it's going to be dissolved together with the mind, which is Manas, and what we call the universal intelligence, Mahat. In turn, Mahat is going to be dissolved into the Shukshma Prakriti, which is subtle energy, and then it's going to unite with Parabindu in the supreme point in the Sahasrara chakra. This gradual dissolution of the letters means a dissolution of the petals that sustain them, hence the dismantling of the chakras. The first 5 chakras have bijas, which are consistent in subtle seeds of the elements that they represent. And during the elevation, each element is going to emanate and is dissolved into its corresponding bija. We're going to explain how it happens now in each chakra, but I would like to do another parenthesis because I know we are exploring and mentioning many different terms that we might not be familiar, like this process that I just mentioned in regards to the petals and the letters and how it's been disassembled and dissolved in each chakra. In our classes of each chakra, we're going to learn more about these petals that I just mentioned, the letters of each petal, these bijas, and how everything is happening. So if you would like to, if you're curious and this is something that you're interested in, then I recommend you to go to our classes of each of the chakras. So to continue explaining this process, what we are going to see is that when the Kundalini is in the Muladhara chakra, its element earth emanates and dissolves in its bija, which is Lam. When the Kundalini reaches the Swadhisthana chakra, its element water emanates and dissolves in its bija, which is Vam. Then Lam is dissolved in Vam. When the Kundalini reaches the Manipura chakra, which is the third center, its element fire emanates and it dissolves in its bija Ram. Then Vam is dissolved in Ram. When the Kundalini reaches the Anahata chakra, its element air emanates and it dissolves in its bija, which is Jam. Then Ram is dissolved in Jam. To continue, we're going to have that when the Kundalini reaches the Vishuddha chakra, its element ether emanates and dissolves in its bija Ham. Then Jam, it's going to dissolve in Ham. As the serpentine power rises, there are significant changes, as I mentioned before, in the character and the personality of the sadhaka, which are the result of this involutionary process of the Kundalini. So, along with the dissolution of the earth element in water, all influence of this first center on the mind is going to cease. So from that moment, the mind will be influenced only by the energies that interact in the Swadhisthana chakra. So when the Kundalini absorbs the energetic content of this second center and it reaches the Manipura, Swadhisthana will no longer influence the mind nor the personality. So at this level, the Manipura chakra will be the one influencing the mind. Likewise, when the Kundalini reaches the heart center, it's going to absorb the energies of the Manipura, then the Anahata will be the one influencing the mind. As it continues with her ascent, will absorb the energy of this fourth center allowing the energies of the Vishuddha to influence the mind. Then when it reaches the divine fire of the fifth center, it's going to consume its energy, so the Ajna chakra will influence the mind and the personality. So finally, when Kundalini Shakti reaches the Sahasrara chakra, it leaves and merges with Shiva. In all the classes that we will have on the chakras, we will explore in greater depths what are those psychological qualities that are associated with each of the centers and how opening them influences in our character, as we just mentioned a few times during this class. So this path, it's also called Laya Yoga. We mentioned this in our previous class of the Tattvas, and this is because the yogi experiences at an individual level the same dissolution, Laya, that takes place in the universe at a macrocosmic scale. So in this involutionary process that it's called Laya Krama, the sadhakas realize that their true nature completely transcends this dissolution. It should be noted that this yoga path does not possess a monopoly on the elevation of the serpentine power. We can see it stated in a verse of the Hatha Yoga Pradipika that says, just as the serpent Sega Naga sustains the earth, mountains, and forests, Kundalini is the foundation of all yoga practices. It is by the grace of the Guru that the sleeping Kundalini awakens. Then all the lotuses in the 6 chakras and knots grantees open. And this is in the Hatha Yoga Pradipika 3.1.2. What we see in the book is how there is this misconception that the serpent power elevates and raises the Sahasrara chakra only in followers of the Kundalini Yoga. But the fact is that every sadhaka who realizes pure consciousness through any involutive path experiences the same phenomena. And I like very much the following example that we find in the book that says that, like a doctor who understands the auditory system perfectly and an illiterate person who has no such knowledge, they both have the same ability to hear. So it is not the theoretical or intellectual knowledge that awakens the chakra, but the purity, which is something that we mentioned I don't know how many times by now, but I very much like how we can have a better understanding only by this example, where when we're explaining someone that is an expert in the auditory system, in someone that cannot even read, they both have the ability to listen. So here it's not our theoretical knowledge, the things that we're learning, or even certain practices, but our purity, what is going to actually determine the awakening of the Kundalini, the awakening of the chakras, the elevation, the ascent of the Kundalini. Before Kundalini Shakti reaches the 3rd chakra, the Manipura, experiences cannot be treated as an authentic progress. The Kundalini can climb many times to the Swadhisthana and then descend again. So only after reaching this 3rd center, but not before, we can be sure that this divine fire is not going to descend again. When we're speaking about the elevation of the serpentine power, it is not only an ascension of energy, but we're also speaking about our own ascension. That is, when Shakti unites with Shiva, it is our personal aspect that fuses with the universal reality. The nectar of immortality, which is Amrita, emanates from this fusion of the divine and the masculine. And we say that drinking this nectar will not prevent us from dying, but it will awaken us to the reality that death does not exist. So there are many other examples in the book which are providing us a better understanding of what's happening in the awakening of the, in the ascent of the Kundalini. And another one is the fact that just as our vision becomes clearer at dawn, as the sun is rising above the horizon, our perception is gradually sharpening with this ascent of the Kundalini. As this serpentine power rising, we can see beyond the superficial and progressively perceive a greater integration, as we mentioned in our class of the Tattvas on the true meaning of purity for the sages of Kashmir Shaivism, taking into account this term of yoga that means union and achieving that integration or awakening to what we really are, this union that always existed. So on its way to the most elevated and subtle centers, the Kundalini is purifying various bodies and sheets, and it's revealing hidden spaces and dimensions to us until the individual is going to be finally dissolved in the whole. Also, as the serpentine power pierces and penetrates each chakra, one has access to dimensions that usually remain hidden behind our excessive attachment to this dual reality of names and form. As the divine fire reaches each chakra, we can access a new and a fresh vision of life. Another example to express this is that this process resembles climbing upstairs of a skyscraper. So the view is going to improve as we go up. In most human beings, what we see is that the serpentine power lies dormant, or as we mentioned previously, it's going to move only in the lower chakras. So their consciousness is going to be materialistic and mundane. Also, their lives are going to be dominated by these sensory pleasures, by going after pleasure. So there is a very big difference between an open chakra and an awakened one. Chakras can be open, but not necessarily awakened. So a chakra is open when it is active and works normally, and it's incoming and outgoing energy. They are maintaining the proper levels and they are rotating clockwise. If it rotates counterclockwise, then it means that it's obstructed, it's blocked or closed. What we will see is that an energy center is actually awakened only when the Kundalini Shakti has pierced it and absorbed its prana Shakti and the energy of its Deva. So as long as the Kundalini is below the fifth center, we can still speak and communicate with our fellow beings. When it ascends beyond the fifth center, the experience transcends verbalization and it's therefore indescribable. In the sixth center, Bhagavan, it's awaiting, which is divinity with personal qualities. Then this fusion of Shiva and Shakti does not occur until the divine power reaches the seventh center, which is the Sahasrara chakra. Only then one is actually blessed with this state of super consciousness in which the ego is transcendent and the universal love is realized. Death, to the relative reality of nascent forms, is experienced along with a complete evaporation of difference between subject and object. To reach the crown center means completely losing this separate personality and then fusing with an infinite ocean of Sat Chit Ananda, or absolute existence, wisdom, and bliss. So remember how we spoke in our previous class how Kundalini is compared to a serpent or a creature that does not usually attack without a reason. However, it can be very, very dangerous if it's disturbed while resting. So similarly, it is not recommended to try to awaken the Kundalini without the proper guidance. We mentioned it many times, without being properly prepared, because premature attempts can cause irreparable physical and mental harm. And this is the reason that the sadhana recommended by an expert master is going to play as such an important place in this path. So the process of the Kundalini Yoga aspires to this shift from diversity towards the one source, and the progress in this process will determine the level of consciousness of the individual. So the transformation at the level of consciousness is going to be an expansion of this contracted personality, which is the ego. What we are going to see is that in this process of the Kundalini, from this relative or dualistic point of view, we perceive this dichotomy of life between spirit and nature, subject and object, and Brahma and Shakti. So the elevation of the Kundalini is going to lead to this experience of polarity to disappear. So the one absolute nature that lies beyond multiplicity is going to emerge. This ascension of the divine energy is going to lead us to a life of bliss, which cease to perceive ourselves as something or someone that is separate from existence. An elevation of the human nature is going to take place in this pursuit of reunion and fusion with the one spirit. The awakening of the Kundalini, it's basically our own awakening and our opening our eyes to the reality. Now we're going to we are finalizing with this stage of the ascent of the Kundalini, and we are going to speak about the descent of the Kundalini Shakti. In regards to the descent of the Kundalini, we read the following in the Devi Gita. Satisfying the presiding deities of the 6 centers by offering them the descending stream of nectar, a wise person will then lead Kundalini back along the same path to the supporting root center, Muladhara. For the pleasure of the gods residing in the 6 chakras, carry back that nectar to each on the same path until reaching Muladhara. This is from the Devi Gita, from the Devi Bhagavatam 7:35-51. What we see is, as I mentioned at the beginning, that in general, when Kundalini is mentioned, the emphasis is placed on the elevation from the 1st center to the 7th. But the descent is not less important, and this is what we're going to see next. There are those who think that after reaching these higher centers, the Kundalini will not descend again. But one who does not understand the descent of this serpentine power then will not be able to understand an enlightened being that is acting in the mundane and earthly. And I very much like how we will see this comparison of what's happening when we have only the first few centers, the inferior centers and the superior centers open, and how this actually works in the enlightened being. After the ascent of the Kundalini, what happens is this merging with Shiva, which is producing what we can call the fusion between Purusha and Prakriti. So it's going to eradicate this experience of duality. After this fusion of Shiva and Shakti, they're going to remain united in what we call the Bindu, and this is later going to divide in 2 again, allowing the Kundalini to descend, traveling the same path on which she ascended. So the ascent is only of the Kundalini from the 1st center towards the 7th. However, the descent is with both Kundalini and Shiva. So those who live life in a very extroverted way, striving for money, for power, for sex, for pressure, they are considered materialists, whereas those that live a life of introspection, peace, tranquility are going to be considered spiritual. Materialists are moving only in the realm of the first 3 centers, which belong to the external. And as long as only the first 3 chakras are open, we will continue to manifest this superficial personality, because these 3 chakras function only for survival. But a person considered to be spiritual aspires to the 3 upper chakras, which are introspective and subjective. So their direction is toward the depths of our interior, the conflict between materialism and this spirituality is fracturing us as human beings. So we wish to be more spiritual, which is leading us to repress and abandon the materialism. And we believe that the repression of these lower chakras will lead us to be saints and to move in these three upper centers. However, what we're going to see is that enlightened beings, all the chakras function again, those considered to be low or elevated. So after its union with Shiva, this serpentine power will reconstruct the entire system of chakras. So this time, Shakti doesn't descend alone, but with Shiva. Then each chakra will function in perfect harmony and balance between spirit and matter. A true religious being are the ones that are introvert and extrovert, materialist and spiritual, because they have realized the totality and are thus free of conflicts. We will see this very much in different writings of Prabhuji and also in different lectures, how he's explaining about this balance, this equilibrium, and there is no longer this view of this polarity or duality separating, as we just mentioned, materialism and spirituality, positive or negative, but there is this integration in the enlightened being. And in this specific path, we are explaining how the whole chakra system is reintegrated with this descent of the Kundalini power. Before the ascension of this serpentine power, the ordinary mind, it's exercising the dominion over the individuals. But after its descent, what's going to happen is that the transcendental consciousness will express itself through us. When the Kundalini elevates and fuses with Shiva, the personality disappears. The return of the Kundalini and Shakti, it's going to mark the blossoming of the individuality. So what we're going to do now is that we're going to end by reading the last paragraph of this chapter, where we continue delving into what the personality is and what happens to it when the Kundalini merges with Shiva. A personality is a creation of society, assembled from various external elements. It is not an organic unity. It is not integral. It is put together the same way as a clock, a radio, a car, or any other mechanical device. The personality is a collection of screws with a great diversity of heads. On the other hand, individuality is a flower that stems from the depths of existence. Personality is an experience of separation, of disconnection from what surrounds us, while individuality brings with it the experience of deep communion with everyone and everything. After the descent of Kundalini, one lives in a completely different state of consciousness. We live in the world without belonging to it. I want us to stay with this last sentence, that we live in the world without belonging to it. We are finalizing with this class. We are going to have our next class about the chakras, starting from the first center, which is the Muladhara chakra. And then we're going to continue speaking about all the chakras. We are entering to the second section of the book, which is it's deepening into different information that we're going to discover in our next class about the chakras. Thank you very much for the time that you are investing in these classes. Jai Prabhuji.